Lines of determined women stride through city streets, their sashes and banners bright against the gray stone buildings. This is the Suffragettes' March for the Vote, London, early 20th century. A tide of resolve, voices lifted in defiance, demanding equality amid jeers and police presence. Crowds of Sikh demonstrators surge through the streets, turbans bright against the haze of banners and placards. This is the India Queen's Sikh demonstration. London, mid-20th century. A powerful display of diasporic dissent. Voices thundering for justice, identity, and recognition before the empire's gaze. Under the scorching sun, villagers and rebels gather in humble clothing, their faces set with quiet resolve. This is Mahatma Gandhi with Indian rebels during the struggle for independence, India, 1930s. A scene of defiance shaped not by weapons, but by the power of nonviolent resistance and unyielding unity. Tents and makeshift shelters sprawl across the muddy banks of the Anacostia River. Weary veterans huddled in quiet determination. This is the Bonus Army demonstration, Washington, D.C., 1932. World War I soldiers demanding promised pay. Their silent plea met with bayonets, tanks, and the shadow of despair. Crowds pour into liberated streets. Flags unfurled as voices thunder with triumph and vengeance. This is the FFI demonstration, Paris, 1944. The French forces of the interior marching after Nazi retreat, their worn uniforms and raised fists declaring both victory and the heavy cost of resistance. Bus seats sit defiantly occupied, a quiet woman's gaze fixed forward as tension grips the air around her. This is Rosa Parks during the Montgomery bus boycott, Alabama, 1955. A single act of stillness sparking a movement where silence itself became a weapon against injustice. A vast sea of people stretches across the National Mall, banners and signs lifted high beneath the shadow of the Lincoln Memorial. This is the March on Washington, D.C., 1963. A chorus of thousands demanding civil rights, their chants swelling as Dr. King readies to speak of a dream. Rows of students sit cross-legged on the vast stone expanse, banners fluttering in stark contrast to the gray sky. This is students demonstrating at Tiananmen Square, Beijing, 1989, faces young yet resolute, their chants for democracy echoing beneath looming soldiers and the weight of silence. Torches flicker above a restless crowd, their shadows stretching across Munich streets as anger boils over the post-war settlement. This is the 1921 demonstration against the Treaty of Versailles, Munich, Germany. All political parties uniting in fury, voices thundering against humiliation and imposed defeat. Footsteps drum against the long highway, weary marchers moving in unbroken lines beneath the southern sun. This is the March to Montgomery, Alabama, 1965. Thousands pressing forward for voting rights, their songs of freedom rising against threats of violence and the weight of history. Banners sway above steady lines of marchers, their footsteps measured, eyes fixed on a distant goal. This is demonstrators marching to their destination, mid-20th century, a procession of resolve, where every step carries the weight of struggle, unity, and the promise of change. Placards scrawl urgent pleas as crowds press together, chants rising in defiance of distant battlefields. This is protesters at an anti-war rally, 1960s America. Students, veterans, and citizens united, their voices clashing with authority as the cost of war echoes through the streets. Grimy faces and worn helmets emerge from the pit head, now lifted high in protest rather than labor. This is British coal miners on strike, United Kingdom, 1984 to 85. A march of defiance against pit closures, where solidarity and hardship collide on picket lines watched by stern police ranks. Broken cobblestones and overturned trams form makeshift walls, smoke curling above determined young faces. This is Czech students barricading the street, Prague, 1968. Their defiance against Soviet tanks carved into the city itself. A fragile stand of youth against the weight of an empire. Streets echo with chants as smoke rises from scattered barricades, crowds pressing forward with flags and clenched fists. This is protesters in Paris, May 1968. Students and workers united, their defiance painted across walls in slogans. A city trembling between revolution and repression. Rainbow banners ripple above a determined crowd, voices fierce with pride and defiance. This is the Stonewall March, New York City, 1969. A procession born from nights of resistance where the LGBTQ+ community claims the streets, demanding dignity, freedom, and a future unchained by fear. Students scatter in panic across the campus lawn, smoke lingering where shots have just rung out. This is Kent State University, Ohio, 1970. A protest against the Vietnam War shattered by gunfire, 4 young lives taken, and a nation left staring into the face of its own unrest. Children in school uniforms surge into the dusty streets, fists raised as police lines close in with rifles and tear gas. This is the Soweto Uprising, South Africa, 1976. Students marching against apartheid's language laws, their cries for freedom met with deadly force and unshaken courage. Endless waves of men and women pour through Tehran's boulevards, banners and portraits lifted high beneath a gray winter sky. This is the Tehran March, Iran, 1979. A revolution surging in unison, voices thundering against the Shah, each step echoing with the weight of history's turning tide. Workers flood the factory gates, banners aloft as chants rise above the clamor of machines now silenced. This is the FLM protest at Fiat's Mirafiori factory, Turin, Italy, 1969. A storm of labor unrest, where thousands of metal workers demand dignity, rights, and a voice against industrial power. Candles flicker in the dim church light as workers kneel shoulder to shoulder, heads bowed in solemn unity. This is Lech Wałęsa, with close associates at Mass, Poland, early 1980s. Faith and resistance entwined, as Solidarity's leaders draw strength from prayer before confronting the weight of communist rule. Streets run with smoke and shattered glass as citizens raise fists against soldiers wielding rifles. This is the Gwangju Uprising, South Korea, 1980. Students and workers standing shoulder to shoulder, their cries for democracy answered with bullets. A city's sacrifice, igniting a nation's resolve. A human tide floods Manila's Epifanio de los Santos Avenue, rosaries and flowers held high before lines of tanks. This is the People Power Revolution, Philippines, 1986. millions defying dictatorship with prayer and courage, their unity turning the street into a battleground of hope over fear. Armored columns roll into the vast square, their treads grinding past torn banners and abandoned bicycles. This is the Chinese army crushing the Tiananmen Square protest, Beijing, 1989. A movement for democracy silenced by gunfire, the cries of students swallowed in smoke and steel. Crowds swarm atop the graffitied concrete, chisels and hammers striking as floodlights cut through the night. This is the fall of the Berlin Wall. Berlin, 1989. Strangers embrace across a once forbidden divide, a fortress of division crumbling under the weight of unity and jubilation. Wenceslas Square glows with a sea of candles, the air alive with jingling keys as voices swell in defiance. This is the Velvet Revolution, Prague, 1989. Students and citizens united in peaceful protest, their light-piercing decades of oppression as communism begins to crumble. Crowds march through South African streets, fists raised and placards demanding freedom thrust high against the sun. This is an anti-apartheid protest, South Africa, 1980s. Voices of defiance ringing out against racial tyranny, their chants colliding with the looming presence of armed police. Flames engulf storefronts as smoke billows into the night sky, sirens wailing over shattered glass and rushing crowds. This is the Los Angeles riots, 1992, an eruption of fury after the Rodney King verdict, where anger at injustice turned city streets into battlegrounds of rage and survival. Masked rebels in worn uniforms march steadily through mountain roads, red bandanas bright against the dust. This is the Zapatistas on their march to Xochimilco, Mexico, 1997. Indigenous voices rising in defiance, carrying demands for dignity and justice to the heart of the nation's capital. Tear gas clouds drift above streets choked with chanting crowds, banners denouncing global trade fluttering in the chaos. This is the WTO demonstrations, Seattle, 1999. Students, workers, and activists clashing with riot police, their voices challenging the engines of globalization. A lone figure stands firm amid chaos, his voice raised in defiance as police in riot gear press forward. This is student activist David Robinson confronting police during the WTO demonstrations, Seattle, November 30th, 1999. A moment of raw resistance etched into the struggle against globalization. Crowds wave blue and orange flags in the frozen Kiev streets, voices echoing with chants for democracy. This is Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko during the Orange Revolution, Ukraine, 2004. A leader lifted by mass protest as citizens defy fraud and cold to demand their nation's true voice. People climb and balance atop a massive torn poster, stamping over the face it once glorified. This is a protest scene of defiance, late 20th century, where symbols of power are trampled underfoot, and the crowd's anger transforms propaganda into a platform of resistance. Crowds flood Yangon streets, pots and pans clanging in defiance as soldiers stand ready with rifles. This is the Myanmar military coup protests, 2021. A nation's cry for democracy met with brutal force, young faces painted with hope and fear, staring down the shadow of dictatorship. Stadium stands erupt as flags wave wildly, chants rising beyond the game itself. This is the Iran versus Bahrain protest, Tehran, 2001. A football match transformed into a political stage, where cheers and jeers blur into defiance, and sport becomes a vessel for national unrest. Crowds surge through Tunisian streets, flags and banners thrust high as chants echo against government buildings. This is the Tunisia demonstrations, 2011, a nation demanding the dissolution of the ruling party. Voices of revolution rising as the Arab Spring ignites with fury and hope. Tahrir Square swells with a sea of people, banners waving as chants thunder beneath clouds of smoke. This is the anti-government protests in Cairo, Egypt, 2011. Citizens uniting in defiance of decades of rule. Their voices igniting a revolution that shakes the very pillars of power. Thousands kneel shoulder to shoulder across Damascus streets, the call to prayer echoing where gunfire once ruled. This is the first Friday prayer in Damascus since rebel forces deposed the Assad regime, Syria, early 2010s. Faith and revolution entwined. A city breathing freedom after years of fear. Protesters flood lower Manhattan, tents and placards crowding the streets beneath towering skyscrapers. This is Occupy Wall Street's Day of Action, New York City, 2011. Voices denouncing inequality echo through the financial district, as the movement of the 99% confronts the symbols of global power. Crowds pack Madrid's Puerta del Sol, tents and banners filling the square as voices rise through the night. This is the Indignance movement at Puerta del Sol, Madrid, 2011. A mass of citizens demanding change, their camp transforming the heart of the city into a beacon of resistance. Euromaidan protesters in Kyiv clash with riot police as security forces unleash batons, shields, and tear gas against demonstrators demanding closer ties with Europe and denouncing government corruption. Clouds of smoke fill Kyiv's Independence Square as riot police clash with protesters, shields banging against batons under a winter sky. Demonstrators wrapped in Ukrainian flags stand their ground, facing tear gas and rubber bullets during the violent response to the Euromaidan protests of 2013 to 2014. Fifth Avenue in New York City overflows with women carrying banners demanding equal rights, their voices echoing between skyscrapers on August 26, 1970. Marchers in the Women's Strike for Equality raise placards for workplace justice, reproductive freedom, and the unfinished fight for gender equality. Flags of red and yellow ripple against the Barcelona sky as thousands surge through the streets on October 21, 2017. Demonstrators protest Spain's move to suspend Catalan autonomy, their chants thundering through the avenues. An outcry for identity, democracy, and self-determination. Waves of protesters surge through Khartoum's streets, voices raised in defiance as banners demand freedom. This is the protest to end military rule Sudan, 2021. Citizens braving bullets and batons, their march a cry for civilian governance and the promise of democracy. Smoke billows through the narrow streets of Hong Kong as protesters clash with police under the glare of city lights. This is the Unrest Demonstrations, Hong Kong, 2019, umbrellas raised against tear gas, voices echoing through the urban canyons, demanding freedom and resisting control. Fires crackle along Santiago's avenues as thousands march with flags and banners under a haze of smoke. This is the Chile protests, 2019, citizens rallying against inequality, their chants echoing beyond the suspended subway fare hike, turning the streets into a powerful outcry for justice and dignity. Rows of tractors and farmers carrying placards fill London's streets, their boots muddy against the city's polished pavements. This is the Farmers' Rally, London, 1970s. Rural voices rising in protest, demanding fairness as proposed inheritance tax changes threaten generations of hard-won land. Waves of red and yellow flags sweep through Barcelona's streets as crowds chant for independence under the bright September sky. This is the Catalonia Diada demonstration, Spain, 2012. Citizens united in a sea of color, demanding self-determination and a voice for their nation's future.